1. The Black Beast. My house on Bluebell Lane used to be my sanctuary. Now it was just a front row seat to the daily arrogance of wealth. It always began with the sound. Not the healthy rumble of a muscle car, but a low, synthetic, expensive roar that cut through the polite suburban silence of Bluebell Gardens every evening. That sound belonged to Victor Sterling, or, as I mentally referred to his car, the Black Beast. It was a Vector X70, one of those matte black European luxury sedans that looked less like transportation and more like a rolling statement of self-importance. Sterling himself was a man who moved as though the pavement beneath his feet was legally his. Every day, right around 5:15 p.m., he treated our quiet residential street like a private test track. The stop signs at the end of the block were invisible. Posted 25 miles per hour limit was a suggestion he found hilarious. I had lived with the annoyance for months, calming myself with the mantra that everyone breaks the rules a little and it wasn't worth the headache. But last Tuesday, the entitlement stopped being merely obnoxious and became genuinely dangerous. I was watering the flower beds when the Vector X70 came flying down the long stretch, easily hitting 40. Ahead, the neighborhood mail carrier, an older gentleman named Mr. Evans, was stepping back from the curb after dropping a package, his bright yellow truck partially blocking the lane. Sterling didn't slow down. He didn't even tap his brakes. Instead, he simply swerved across the double yellow line and accelerated, passing the mail truck with maybe 6 inches to spare, forcing Mr. Evans to scramble back onto the lawn. The sudden, vicious blast of the Vector's horn felt less like a warning and more like an assertion of dominance. It wasn't just speed, it was a deliberate disregard for human safety, a calculated act of aggression that screamed, "My time is more valuable than your life." The raw anger I felt wasn't just about Mr. Evans, it was about the years of little injustices this neighborhood protected. The HOA cared about the height of my grass but not the speed of the Vector. The local police ignored the complaints because a car that expensive must belong to someone important. I stood there, soaked by my own hose, watching the black taillights disappear. That was the moment I stopped being a passive observer and became an active combatant. I walked inside, past the window facing the street, and pulled up the footage from the dashcam I kept running 24/7, a habit I'd started after a few too many close calls. There it was, clear, time-stamped, unedited video showing Victor Sterling nearly running over a federal worker on the job. The evidence was irrefutable. He thinks he's untouchable, I thought, pulling the file onto my desktop. We're about to find out how strong that immunity really is. 2 dashcam and the first call. The footage from the incident with Mr. Evans was perfect. It had the date, the time, and the clear violation of several statutes, most notably reckless driving. I uploaded the clip, burned it onto a thumb drive, and packaged it up with a printed timeline of events. I decided to start with the local police, giving them one chance to do their job. I walked into the Northwood precinct the next morning, feeling a surge of nervous righteousness. I asked to speak to an officer regarding a dangerous traffic violation. A desk sergeant, a tired-looking man named Dale, took my statement with a flat, bored expression. When I showed him the video on the thumb drive, his expression didn't change. He watched Sterling almost take out the mailman, then looked back at me. "Yeah, that's Victor Sterling, lives over in Bluebell Gardens. Drives the Vector," he stated, like he was identifying a local celebrity. "Nice car." "It's dangerous, Sergeant." He almost hit a federal employee. "I have a physical copy of the evidence here," I said, sliding the drive across the counter. He picked it up, flipped it in his fingers, and sighed. "Look, I'll send Officer Kincaid out to have a word. He's familiar with that area. But unless there's property damage or a hospitalization, we're not really going to spend a lot of manpower on a speeding ticket in a private community, even if it is reckless. People drive fast. It's a nice car." The dismissal was chilling. It wasn't even a defense of the law. It was pure deference to the Vector X70's sticker price. I left with a receipt for my complaint, but the sinking feeling that I had just wasted my time. The system was rigged from the first handshake.
Subscribe with us now and stay connected as we journey through every chapter together. Now back to our story.
3. The officer and the thin blue line. 2 days later, Officer Kincaid called me. His tone, already condescending, got worse when he arrived at my house later that afternoon, parking his patrol car deliberately on the edge of my lawn. He was young, clean-cut, and he looked at me like I was wasting his time with neighborhood gossip. He didn't even mention the video. "Mr. Sterling is a respected member of the community," Kincaid said, leaning against his cruiser, crossing his arms. "I spoke with him. He explained that the mail truck was parked illegally, forcing him to swerve, and that he tapped his horn to alert the pedestrian. No foul, no harm." "No foul, no harm?" I stepped closer, pointing to the spot where it happened. "I saw him. He was doing 40+, officer. The footage is crystal clear." "Footage can be manipulated, sir. And frankly, this is a distraction from real police work. My advice? Deal with it through your HOA. That's what they're for. They'll send a stern letter about excessive speed, and that'll be the end of it." He smiled, a practiced, dismissive curve of the lips. I realized then that Kincaid wasn't just indifferent. He was part of the shield. He saw the expensive car and the powerful man and instantly adopted the narrative that protected them both. My evidence, my time, and my safety meant nothing against the thin blue line protecting the wealthy in Bluebell Gardens. The local police were officially a dead end. For the HOA's veto and the unauthorized lens. Since the police punted the problem, I followed Kincaid's cynical advice and filed a formal complaint with the Homeowners Association. It went straight to Mrs. Albright, the HOA President, whose primary function seemed to be ensuring no one's life was as colorful as her garden club uniform. The response came via certified mail, a thick, legalistic letter filled with passive aggression. It stated that after a review of the alleged incident, the board found the evidence inconclusive and dismissed the complaint. But the letter contained a furious, handwritten note tacked onto the bottom. Furthermore, it read, "It has been brought to the board's attention that you are operating unauthorized surveillance equipment pointed at a private right-of-way, violating Section 4.c of our covenants, conditions, and restrictions. You have been issued an immediate fine of $500 for the first offense. Remove all external cameras immediately or face escalating penalties." They didn't just dismiss the reckless driving, they weaponized the bylaws against me. They weren't interested in safety, they were interested in protecting the illusion of control, and Victor Sterling was apparently a cornerstone of that illusion. The system wasn't just biased, it was actively hostile. That $500 fine became my personal declaration of war. I realized that to win, I had to stop asking for permission and start gathering irrefutable proof.
Let's stay connected. Subscribe and join me on this journey every step of the way.
5. The shadow operation. I paid the $500 fine without argument. It was the cost of setting up the new operation. The dashcam was good, but it was fixed. Now I needed multiple perspectives, high definition, and complete covertness. I bought 2 new cameras, small, weatherproof units designed for hunting. I disguised them meticulously, one inside a birdhouse, angled perfectly to catch the stop sign and Sterling's entry point. The other, a tiny lens tucked into the shrubbery near the curb, designed only to capture the driver's face and license plate as he sped past. The work was painstaking. Every night, I retrieved the SD cards under the cloak of darkness, transferred the files, and logged the violations. The collection became the vector file, a digital folder organized by date, time, speed estimate, and violation type. Rolling stop, excessive speed, failure to yield. I wasn't looking for a single isolated incident anymore. I was building a pattern of behavior. Victor Sterling didn't just speed once. He rolled the stop sign 7 days a week, often with a passenger, often while texting. The vector file grew into a digital indictment, a comprehensive, undeniable record of arrogance. It wasn't just video, it was a psychological profile of entitlement, sealed with an electronic timestamp. I was no longer seeking a solution from my neighbors or the local police. I was preparing a weapon for an external force. 6. The dossier and the stone wall. With over a month of flawless footage, 35 clear, concise violations of reckless driving, I assembled the final dossier. Contained a summary letter, printed stills, and the full USB drive. I knew my next move had to be outside the HOA's orbit, but a final attempt at the local precinct was necessary for the paper trail. I walked back into the precinct, this time asking specifically for Officer Kincaid's supervisor. I was directed to Lieutenant Reynolds, a heavy-set man whose office smelled like stale coffee. I laid the dossier on his desk. "Lieutenant, I have comprehensive video proof of criminal traffic violations happening daily by Victor Sterling. I have documented every instance the local police failed to follow up. I need this evidence acted upon." Reynolds didn't even open the file. He tapped the top page with a thick finger. "Look, I know Kincaid talked to you. You've become a nuisance, frankly. This is a civil dispute. You're wasting resources. You keep escalating this, and we're going to have to look into you for harassment." He then delivered the final crushing blow of the local system. "We know Sterling. He's one of the good guys. When you have a genuine crime, come back. Until then, take your little movie project and leave." I picked up my dossier, feeling a strange calm. They had officially rejected undeniable proof. They had declared their loyalty to the Vector X70 and the money it represented. A Reynolds dismissal was the official authorization I needed to go over their heads. My next call would be to the state police barracks. 7. The grand appeal to the trooper. I found the contact information for the State Police Troop B District Office, specifically requesting their Traffic Safety Division. I didn't hold my breath. I was expecting another bureaucratic stone wall. Instead, I got Trooper Harper. She was direct, professional, and refreshingly devoid of the local Northwood bias. I kept my story tight, omitting the HOA drama and the police bias, focusing only on the escalating danger and my irrefutable evidence. "I have over 30 documented instances of reckless endangerment," I told her. "I have video from multiple angles showing clear violations of state traffic code, including near misses with pedestrians." Trooper Harper listened patiently. She didn't ask about Victor Sterling's net worth or the quality of his car. She asked about the jurisdiction. I confirmed the street was part of the state right-of-way, even within the development. "This sounds like a pattern of aggressive driving, not a casual speeding ticket," she said. "I need to see the file. Bring everything, the logs, the flash drive, everything. But understand, if this is merely a dispute, I won't intervene." The next morning, I met Trooper Harper at the state police station, a sterile, anonymous building far removed from Bluebell Gardens. She took the dossier, plugged the USB into her computer, and watched. She watched Chapter 1. She watched Chapter 5. She watched Chapter 7, the day Sterling sped through a children's lemonade stand area. For 10 minutes, she stopped the playback. She looked at me, her face serious. "Your documentation is thorough. Disturbingly thorough. We have grounds for an administrative warrant and a direct enforcement action. We'll be in touch." I walked out feeling lighter than I had in months. Power was finally out of my hands and in the hands of someone who actually cared about the law, not the luxury sedan. 8. The reckoning, the state police arrives. The 5 days following the call from Trooper Harper were the tensest of my life. The shadow operation continued, the hidden cameras recording the Vector X70's every movement, but the purpose had shifted. It was no longer documentation, it was observation. Every rumble of an engine down Bluebell Lane was met with a surge of adrenaline, anticipating the blue flash of state law. The action finally came on a bright Tuesday afternoon around 4:30 p.m. I was in the kitchen making a cup of tea when the low bass rumble of Victor Sterling's engine announced his return from work. Through the front window, I watched as the black Vector X70 approached the mandatory four-way stop at the corner of Primrose and Bluebell. Sterling, as usual, treated the bright red octagon as a suggestion, rolling through it at 15 miles per hour without so much as a tap of the brake pedal, his left hand already reaching for the radio dial. It was a perfect, arrogant run. But this time, it wasn't just another clip for the dossier. Before the Vector X70 could clear the intersection, a sleek, unmarked state police interceptor, dark gray and nearly invisible against the suburban palette, materialized from the side street, its subtle, visor-mounted blue and red lights flashing to life. It was so fast, so precise, it was like a predator striking. Cruiser, driven by Trooper Harper, pulled directly in front of Sterling's car. The Vector X70 screeched to a halt, the sudden G-force sending its driver lunging forward against his seatbelt. I snatched my phone and watched the unfolding scene from the front window. Trooper Harper, a figure of calm, disciplined authority in the crisp uniform, walked toward the Vector X70. She spoke clearly, her voice sharp enough to carry. Victor Sterling, who usually exuded dismissive confidence, was already sputtering. "Do you have any idea who I am? This is a private community," Sterling demanded, leaning out of the window. The conflict escalated rapidly when local forces arrived. First, Officer Kincaid, clearly alerted by the sudden police activity in his quiet domain, pulled up, his municipal cruiser flashing. Then, a minute later, Mrs. Albright, the HOA President, marched down the street in a cloud of righteous indignation, her face set in a furious mask. "Trooper, with all due respect, what is the meaning of this?" "This is our jurisdiction," Kincaid announced, approaching Harper. "I recognize Mr. Sterling. Is there an issue?" "There is, officer," Trooper Harper replied, holding up a hand to stop him. Her demeanor was firm, not aggressive, highlighting the difference between a town cop and state authority. "This vehicle has been cited for reckless driving on a state right-of-way, which is currently under review by Troop B. We are operating under state statute and a detailed administrative warrant." Mrs. Albright stepped forward, pointing a manicured finger at my home. "This is a harassment campaign. That man put up illegal cameras. I fined him." Trooper Harper turned her head slightly toward the HOA President, her expression completely unreadable. "Ma'am, your HOA bylaw dispute is irrelevant to the criminal statute being enforced. The evidence, which includes video from multiple confirmed sources, has been validated by my division. I suggest you both step back." The look on Kincaid's face, a mixture of disbelief, betrayal, and awe at the state police vehicle, was priceless. He stood down immediately, defeated by the simple reality of the chain of command. Harper returned to Victor Sterling's window, who was now visibly deflated and frantic on his phone. She completed the process with icy professionalism, issuing a thick sheaf of citations that included multiple counts of reckless driving and excessive speed. As Trooper Harper climbed back into her interceptor, she glanced briefly at my house, not making eye contact but nodding, a single small acknowledgement of the shared victory. Then she pulled away, leaving Victor Sterling alone on the street, clutching a handful of expensive paper, his black Vector X70 now looking less like a symbol of power and more like a very expensive, very illegal piece of evidence. I knew, watching Kincaid and Albright slink away, that the long game had finally paid off. The local system had been forced to bend.
Subscribe with us now and stay connected as we journey through every chapter together. Now back to our story.
9. The quiet aftermath. The silence that descended after Trooper Harper left was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. The immediate fallout was delicious. Officer Kincaid spent the next hour patrolling our street, not to police traffic but to glare at my house. Mrs. Albright, pale and furious, had an emergency HOA meeting that night. The next day, I received a formal, if tightly wound, letter from the HOA stating that the $500 fine had been retroactively rescinded due to a misinterpretation of Bylaw 4.c. The local power structure was scrambling to cover its tracks. The real justice, however, came through the courts. Trooper Harper had given me an insider's view on the citations. They weren't just tickets, they were a mandatory court summons. Victor Sterling, who thought he could buy his way out of anything, was charged with numerous moving violations, his driving record stained by the indisputable evidence of the Vector file. The final straw came a month later. Sterling pleaded out to avoid a full trial, losing his license for 6 months and incurring massive fines. More importantly, the local buzz was deafening. Neighbors who had once whispered about his money were now openly discussing his recklessness. His entitlement had been publicly revoked. The Vector X70 sat in his driveway, gathering dust, a $150,000 lawn ornament. Tennequite Street. 6 months passed, and the Vector X70 never moved. I enjoyed the silence, but I was always watchful. The shadow operation was officially retired, the hidden cameras taken down, but the habits I'd built remained. Then, one brisk morning, I saw it. A flatbed tow truck was backing slowly down Bluebell Lane. Victor Sterling, looking thinner and slightly less arrogant, was standing on his driveway, overseeing the removal. The black beast, the symbol of his power and my oppression, was winched onto the truck, looking pathetically ordinary against the suburban sky. He didn't make eye contact as the truck drove past my house, but I felt his acknowledgement of my quiet, persistent victory. That afternoon, another car pulled into Sterling's driveway, a sensible silver mid-sized sedan. It was driven by a young woman who was likely his new chauffeur. The next day, at 5:15 p.m., a different sound came down the street. It was the gentle thrum of the silver sedan, traveling exactly 25 miles per hour. Paused fully at the stop sign, waited 3 seconds, and then proceeded. It was just a sedan, driven safely down a residential street. But for me, it was the sound of true peace. I had fought the entitlement, the bias of the local police, and the corruption of the HOA, and I had won. My sanctuary was finally returned to me. The street was quiet, and that quiet felt like the sweetest form of justice. The end.